On July 23rd, Bryan Kohberger was officially sentenced after pleading guilty to the Idaho 4 murders. Nearly 3 years after the horrific events of November 13th, 2022, the prosecution and law enforcement held a press conference, promising that now that the case had been concluded, it was finally time for transparency in an investigation that had long been criticized for its secrecy. But any hope of that transparency was short-lived.
We want to be as transparent as we possibly can, so we wanted to get those out to everyone.
Chief, from the very beginning, your department was saying this was a targeted attack. Can you now say who was the target and what's your evidence to show that?
I'll turn that question over to the investigators to answer that one.
Well, I think Darren and I have, the evidence suggests that there was a reason that this particular house was chosen. What that reason is, we don't know. We don't know who the target was, and we're not going to speculate on that up here today. But we can tell you that for whatever reason, Mr. Kohberger chose that residence. Perhaps it's the location, layout, we don't know. But that's, to the best of my knowledge, that's what that statement likely led to.
So this already is kicking it off on the wrong note. This is not full transparency, in my opinion. In my opinion, that cop lied to cover their asses for saying the wrong thing right at the beginning.
If you haven't followed the Idaho 4 case from the very beginning, you might be surprised by the first question that was asked at the press conference following Bryan Kohberger's sentencing. It wasn't a question about the plea deal, or a question about the investigation, or even a question about the victims. It was a question about a press release, one that referred to the murders as a targeted attack. That might seem like an odd focus now, but here's what makes it even more striking. That's the exact same question that was the very first question that was asked by the press at the very first press conference, back in November of 2022, just days after the murders. And both times, then and now, it went unanswered. This lingering question was born from the police department's very own wording, and has caused confusion, frustration, and speculation for almost 3 years, but somehow still remains unanswered. In today's video, we're going to take a look back at how a single phrase in a press release became a symbol of miscommunication, and how law enforcement's failure to address it has become part of the larger pattern of missteps that continue to cast a shadow over this case. The Moscow Police Department issued a press release on November 15, 2022, just 2 days after the murders occurred. In it, they said, "The City of Moscow Police Department would like to address community concerns about public safety. We hear you, and we understand your fears. We want you to know that we, like you, have been devastated and distressed by these young lives that were cut short needlessly. We determined early in the investigation that we do not believe there is an ongoing threat for community members. Evidence indicates that this was a targeted attack." The press release did not explain what evidence led police to believe the murders were a targeted attack, nor did it clarify what exactly was meant by that phrase. It did, however, state, "At this time, we have shared every piece of information that we can without compromising the ongoing investigation." On November 16, 2022, the day after the initial press release, the Moscow Police Department held its first press conference regarding the homicide investigation. During the briefing, Police Chief James Fry took questions from reporters, but that portion lasted just over 11 minutes before he abruptly ended it. Chief Fry appeared unprepared for the direction of the questioning, which quickly zeroed in on two major points of confusion. One was the revelation that 2 surviving roommates had been home during the attack, but waited roughly 8 hours before calling 911, a detail we'll cover more in an upcoming video. The other was a growing concern over the department's own words from the day before, when they described the killings as a targeted, isolated event.
So at this time, I'm going to open it up to some questions that I'm sure you have, and we'll do the best we can to answer those for you.
Hello, Chief Ray.
Hello.
Thank you for having us. I'm Amanda Rowley with Creme 2 News. You mentioned that there's an indication that it's an isolated, targeted incident, and there is an individual somewhere. Can you give us a reason as to why there's that belief there is a suspect? And can you also give a little more information on the forced entry? There's no sign of forced entry, but was the door, did it seem like any of the entries were left unlocked by any means?
I'll answer the last part there just because it's at the front end of my mind. we're not 100% sure if the door was unlocked, but there was no damage to anything, and the door was still open when we got there.
And my first question,
Yeah.
if you'd like me to read.
No, I think I haven't. In these cases, we take the totality of the things that we see, and they're very dynamic, right? And they're very big, and there's a lot of information, and we try to take that information, and some of it we can't share with you, correct? But we try to take that information, we try to make the best educated decision we can. We review that as a team with our detectives, along with our prosecutors, along with the university, and we try to make that best decision on that. So we, at that time, believe that there was no a threat, and our goal is to provide safety for this community. That's why we're bringing in the resources we're bringing. We want a close to this, and we want to do everything we can to let the people in our community know that we care. We want them to feel safe. We want them to be safe, and we're going to do everything we can to do that.
If Chief Fry thought his vague and non-responsive answer would put the issue to rest, he was mistaken. Reporters continued to circle back to the same question, pressing for clarity on what the department meant by calling the killings a targeted, isolated event. The chief's inability or refusal to explain the meaning behind the department's own statement only added to the confusion and concern.
And how can you say it's a targeted attack if you don't have a suspect?
Like I said, we take the totality of the situation. We try to make the best bit of information we can with everything that comes in, and then we make our decision off of that. So at this time, I'm not going to expand upon that. But like I've said, we do have a suspect out somewhere, and we are looking for that individual to solve this.
Hi, Rachel Sun, Northwest Public Broadcasting. I just want to clarify something you said earlier. Over the past couple of days, the information that we've been getting is there's not a threat to the public. And earlier I heard you say you can't be sure that there is no threat. I just want to clarify what your stance is on that at this time.
So we still believe it's a targeted attack. But the reality is there's still a person out there who committed 4 horrible, horrible crimes. So I think we got to go back to there is a threat out there still, possibly. We don't know. We don't believe it's going to be to anybody else. But we all have to be aware of our surroundings and make sure that we're watching out for each other.
And you guys have said repeatedly that there's no threat to the public, but we don't know who the suspect is. We don't know where he's at. How is there no threat to the public at this point?
Well, that's kind of an unknown. Like I said, we took the information that we had at the time, but we do need to be aware. The individual is still out there, right? We need to be vigilant. We need to watch out for our neighbors. We're a community policing community. We've said that for years, and it's a community that watches out for each other. We need to continue to do that until we can close this off and make an arrest.
Why has there been such limited information over the past couple of days? I mean, we're almost 4 days into this. Why has it been so limited?
That's a difficult. We have a lot of information coming in, and we have tried to push out some information through press releases. But the reality is, I probably should have been standing here a day or so ago, but I'm here now. We're going to continue to be here. We're going to continue to give you the information we can. We care about this community. I care about this community. I've worked here for 27 years. I want this community to be the safest community around. So
The Moscow Police Department had a choice in those early days. They could have been transparent and honest with the public. Instead, they chose a path of vague language, half-truths, and ultimately deceit, all in an effort to make the community feel safe, even if that sense of safety was only an illusion. But that choice came at a cost. Rather than calming fears, it created confusion. Rather than building trust, it fueled doubt. And as we'll see, that pattern of evasiveness only grew worse over time. The questions didn't stop at the first press conference. In fact, they only intensified. Each new statement from the department seemed to raise more concerns about whether the investigation was being handled with the care and competence it demanded.
Dan Springer, Fox News. If I can get Captain Lanier. Sir, why not tell the public who the target was? You've said that this was a targeted attack. Why not tell the public who was targeted. If it was multiple people, it would go a long ways to telling the public what you're looking for and who you're looking for, the type of person you're looking for. Why not do that to alleviate some of the fears out there in the community?
Well, first and foremost, we have the integrity of the investigation to preserve. And we feel like that information is integral to us and how we conduct our investigation. Releasing that to the public may or may not flood us with a lot of information that's not relevant or specific to what we're looking at. So
want more information from the public?
we do want more information, but we don't want to put our investigation in jeopardy by releasing what we have. There's always a balance between what you're willing to release versus what you're trying to gather. We told the public very clearly from the beginning that we're looking for a knife. We've told the public very clearly from the beginning that we believe it was a targeted attack. To be honest, you're going to have to trust us on that at this point, because we're not going to release why we think that.
Captain Lanier's statement was hard for the public to swallow, especially considering the question being asked wasn't about sensitive evidence or investigative strategy. It was simply a request for clarity about a public statement they had already issued. But instead of clearing things up, they somehow made everything even more confusing from there.
That the University of Idaho made yesterday during the vigil to honor the lives of 4 students killed there just 3 weeks ago.
The community wants answers. Police have not identified a suspect. And on top of that, investigators are going back and forth publicly over whether this was a targeted attack. Fox 13's AJ Janavel has more.
On Wednesday, the Moscow Police Department seemingly put out a statement saying they do not know if the murders that happened at the University of Idaho were a targeted attack. This happening after days of investigators saying that is exactly what they believed. Officials posted the statement on the Moscow Police Department's website and official Facebook page. The statement reads in full, quote, "Conflicting information has been released over the past 24 hours. The Latah County Prosecutor's Office stated the suspect or suspects specifically looked at this residence and that one or more of the occupants were undoubtedly targeted. We have spoken with the Latah County Prosecutor's Office and identified this was a miscommunication. Detectives do not currently know if the residents or any occupants were specifically targeted, but continue to investigate. However, officials say this update was also a miscommunication. I spoke to investigators over the phone who clarified the confusion, providing me with this statement, which reads in full, quote, "Our clarification last night directly addressed comments made by Latah County Prosecutor Thompson, who said the suspect or suspects specifically looked at this residence and that one or more of the occupants were undoubtedly targeted. We remain consistent in our belief that this was indeed a targeted attack, but have not concluded if the target was the residence or its occupants." This is the third statement that could point to a motive in about 24 hours, each of which contradict the others on key facts in the case. Another element adding to the confusion of this investigation is there are several law enforcement agencies who are putting out information on the case. I have reached out to investigators to see if they will speak to me on camera about this confusion. They tell me they are not available today. I have put in a formal request to speak to them when they are available. Reporting here in Moscow, I'm AJ Janavel for Fox 13 News.
So here we are, nearly 3 years later. Bryan Kohberger has been convicted and is now in prison. And yet, despite everything we've learned, the Moscow Police Department continues to cling to the original narrative. It's clear to anyone who's paying attention that this was never a straightforward targeted attack. That claim, made in those early days, was a deliberate attempt to give the public a false sense of safety. It wasn't just misleading, it was a lie. And instead of owning up to it, the department continues to deny, deflect, and double down, refusing to take responsibility for the confusion and mistrust they created from the start.
The evidence suggests that there was a reason that this particular house was chosen. What that reason is, we don't know. We don't know who the target was, and we're not going to speculate on that up here today. But we can tell you that for whatever reason, Mr. Kohberger chose that residence. Perhaps it's the location, layout, we don't know. But that's, to the best of my knowledge, that's what that statement likely led to.
He chose the house. Of course he chose a house. If a crime took place in a house. But it's like literally the opposite of a targeted attack. You have no idea why he went into this house. That's random. That's a random selection. That's the opposite of targeted. So I think he's just kind of disclosed that that initial public statement that MPD made to try to calm the community is bullshit. They had no idea. They
said it was targeted, I assume, because they wanted to keep the panic level down. But sorry, that's not your job. Your job is to tell the truth. If there was reason to panic, then you need to let the community know that. There was a killer on the loose who just murdered 4 people in the span of 12 minutes. And you had no business saying that it was targeted and like suggesting people didn't need to worry. Kids did need to worry. We had no idea in those initial moments and days who the killer was or whether he was going to target somebody else. I get it. You were trying to lower the temperature, but you had no information that the temperature should be lowered. You really didn't. They've never spoken to it. They've never explained themselves. And now here we get this guy saying we said targeted because we knew he had targeted that home. Bullshit. That is not what happened. That's a lie. I'll tell you that right now. That was an obvious lie.
So here's the bottom line. When a law enforcement agency chooses to dig in its heels, refusing to acknowledge mistakes, refusing to correct a record, refusing to accept accountability, they forfeit the trust that gives their authority any legitimacy in the first place. If they can't be honest about something as simple as a poorly worded press release, why should anyone trust them with the power to carry out a homicide investigation? For those who are frustrated that so many people still have doubts about whether this case was resolved fairly, look no further than the actions of the investigators in the early days. The confusion, the contradictions, the refusal to clarify even the most basic claims. It all created an environment of uncertainty that persists to this day. And now, as people begin to comb through the public records and documents that have finally been released by the Moscow Police Department, it's becoming even more apparent just how flawed and inadequate the investigation really was. The question isn't why people still have doubts, it's how anyone could not have doubts. This case was never going to be easy, but the path to justice, real justice, is supposed to be grounded in transparency, accountability, and truth. Instead, what the public got was secrecy, deflection, and a department more focused on protecting its image than earning trust. And this isn't just about Moscow. The consequences of this kind of failure ripple far beyond one small town or one tragic case. When law enforcement agencies lose the public's trust, everyone suffers. Victims and their families suffer. Communities suffer. And the very system meant to protect us begins to erode. Justice isn't about locking someone up. It's about the process, the how, and whether it's something the public can believe in. And in this case, for far too many people, that belief is gone.